All right, so hello everyone, and thank you for being here. My name is Paul D'Ambrosio, and I teach Chinese philosophy at East China Normal University, where the 四海为学 Collaborative Learning Project is based. I want to welcome you all today to our 33rd lecture and our 64th event since 2022. Today we're hosting Professor Ronnie Littlejohn, who will talk about the perfected person in Chinese thought. We have a really nice lineup of younger scholars to discuss with Professor Littlejohn, including Henry Allen, also of East China Normal University, Shi Wei of Tsinghua University, and Professor Sharon Small from Beijing Normal University, Zhuhai campus. Our chair today is Zheng from Nanjing Normal University. And it has become a tradition here at 四海为学 to give younger scholars a chance to be part of high-profile academic events by inviting them to take part as chairs or as discussants. So if there are any younger scholars in the audience who wish to be part of future events, please email me or you can message me in the Zoom chat. This event today will be 90 minutes in total, ending promptly at 10:30 a.m. Beijing time. Before getting things started and handing them over to Zheng Ke, I just want to say a few words about the 四海为学 Collaborative Learning Project. This project hopes to distinguish itself from some of the less productive, conventional practices sometimes found in contemporary academia. As posted on our website, we are not interested in male peacocks, in jerks, or in any form of egoism or self-promotion. We hope to curb all types of aggressive and look at me, I'm smarter than you, or don't I know so much, and similar attitudes sometimes found in academic exchanges. We might even go so far as to say that we hope to be somewhat of a counterbalance for the negative attitudes often found in blind reviews. While there is a time and a place for anonymity, or at least the appearance of anonymity, communication in academia should have just as much time and place for speaking to one another on more congenial and community-forming settings. The neologism 四海为学, which was created by Robin Wong, is a play on 四海为家, and we hope to keep this idea of 四海为家at the foreground of all of our events. The 四海为学 Collaborative Learning Project seeks to accomplish these shifts in orientation during academic exchange by encouraging productive communication, humble discussions, real questions, and responses that are open and honest. We hope to foster environments where people truly learn from and with one another. So before introducing our chair, I just want to once again thank everyone for being here, and especially Professor Ronnie Littlejohn for taking so much time to share with us today. Our chair is Zheng Ke. She is a master's candidate at Nanjing Normal University, and her work investigates news discourse within the framework of ecological linguistics, with additional research interests in corpus linguistics and critical discourse analysis. Thank you for hosting today, Zheng Ke. The screen is yours.
Okay, so thank you, Paul, for that kind introduction. And good morning, everyone. It's a genuine privilege to chair today's session on a profoundly resonant topic, and also to introduce our esteemed lecturer, Professor Ronnie Littlejohn. Professor Littlejohn is Keenly Distinguished Professor of Philosophy and Director of Asia Studies at Belmont University. He is author and editor of 11 books, including 2 in Chinese translation published by the Foreign Scholars Prize of Beijing, PRC. His recent English language books include The Historical Dictionary of Confucianism, Chinese Philosophers and Philosophy, The Historical Dictionary of Taoism, Introduction to Chinese Philosophy, Confucianism Introduction, and Taoism Introduction. He is currently completing production of a 8-episode documentary series entitled China's Perfect Person for Amazon Direct Video. In 2016, he received the International Talent Cooperation Program Award from the Department of Education of Henan Province PRC. And also in the US, he was named 2015 the 2015 Tennessee University Professor of the Year by the Kennedy Foundation for the Advancement of Teaching. So without further ado, let us listen, learn, and be inspired. Please join me in giving a very welcome to Professor Littlejohn.
Oh, thank you much, Zheng. I really appreciate that. And I want to thank you, Paul, and everyone who has been instrumental in putting together the collaborative learning project. I think it is a superb project, and I myself have enjoyed learning from it, especially in the recordings. I'm so glad that we have the recordings, and I do wish that all the commentators' comments and so forth could be included. Maybe in our next round, we will be able to do that. I would love to express my appreciation also to Professor Sharon Small and Professor Wei and Lasher Henry Allen. Thank you all for being here and commenting on the small remarks that I'll be making. I want to apologize for my voice. I've been sick for about a week and I'm just now getting my voice back. But I didn't talk today, so hopefully it will hold up throughout the time. But I know it could be really annoying, especially since I'm speaking in English with the whole presentation this morning rather than Chinese, but my Chinese would be worse. So we won't do that. All right, I'd like to just share a presentation with you now. Let me just confirm that everyone can see this. Okay, great. So I want to begin by saying that since the passing of the COVID pandemic, I've been working on a 10-episode video documentary project called China's Perfected Persons. This project will be forthcoming from Amazon Video Direct. And I'm a little bit behind our colleague. If you have seen Brian Van Norden's new work on Confucius, it's really first class stuff, and I highly recommend it to you. And I hope you'll have a chance to see it. And maybe Brian can come and talk about his project. Maybe he's already spoken to the collaborative learning sessions and such. So what I'd like to do, first of all, is tell you a little bit about how this project is configured and to just sort of indicate to you that the term Zhenren that I'm translating as perfected person, I know it can be translated in many different ways. This term became a title or honorific in Taoist history, and especially by the time of, let's say, Sima Qian and records of the historians, the term was already being used as an honorific for the followers of the Tao and for those who had distinguished themselves by living extraordinarily different kinds of life. And in by the time of the later part of the Han, with let's say Zhang Daoling, John Dowling as he's known, and his experience, he was already being called Zhenren as a title. Normally he was called Taiji Zhenren, or the perfected person of Taiji. And this title accompanied him throughout his life in the development of the Tianshi Celestial Master movement. And it was used alongside of the very more common title that's still used today, Zhang Tianshi, or Celestial Master Zhang. By the 200s, so far as I know, the first woman to receive this title was the, let's say, semi-historical, probably historical, Wei Huaxin. Wei Huaxin, she got the title of Qing Zhenren, or perfected person of clear. I guess Qing here would be clear emptiness. She's very well known, of course, because was the master or the mysterious teacher of Yangshi, the spirit medium, who received the revelations in the 4th century that established the basic text of the Shanqing lineage. Yangshi himself, as far as I know, never received the honorific of Zhenren. But of course, the people from whom he received the revelations and so forth were all Zhenren. And when Dao Hongqing systematized these revelations and edited them into the Zheng, the declarations of the perfection of the perfected, all of these were brought together. Probably the next major sort of use of this term as an honorific occurs with Sima Chengjian in the 7th century, and you remember that Sima gave the lectures that came to be put together in the collection, the Zuowang, Sitting and Forgetting, or Sitting in Forgetfulness, or as Livia Cohn translates it, Setting in Oblivion, where she translates Wang as oblivion and not just the usual forgetfulness. I mentioned on the slide, I mentioned Rao Dong Tien, who received the revelations that eventually came to be a part of the text on the correct methods of the celestial heart. I think you might be familiar with that, the Tianxin Dao. And then, of course, Wang Chongyong, the founder of the Chuanjian movement, the complete perfection movement, as you know, was spoken of as Zhenren. And after he left Shanxi and returned to Shandong in the middle part of his career, the 7 disciples that he gathered at that time came to be called the 7 perfected persons. But still today, and I spend a lot of time in Taoist Miao and temples across China, and it's still the case that even those that, or maybe I should say, especially those that honor Taishang Laojiang or Lord Lao, the attendants usually to Lao Tzu are all called Zhenren. And but there are others we could mention, Lu Dongben, Sun Bu'er, and so forth. Something that maybe is worth noting is that as the Buddha sutras and practices came to be translated into Chinese, the Chinese term that was often used in many of these translations for Arhat, what we would call today Arhat, was Zhenren. And so the term has a very long and venerable tradition. And if you want to talk about any of that, I'll make a stab if I know anything uh, about it to answer any of the questions for you that I can. But what I'd like to do is go back into the classical text, particularly the Zhuangzi specifically, and in some cases the Lao Tzu or the Tao Te Ching, and talk a little bit about the use and formation of the concept of Genren, and also the phenomenology that accompanies this ascription. That is, there is a particular formula used in the Zhuangzi for one who enters the state of alternative consciousness that is usually associated with Genren, and we'll talk a little bit about that formula as we go through. As I say, I recognize that the term can be translated in many different ways. And of course, I'm not using perfected here in the way that it might occur in moral philosophy or ethics, whether in the West or in China as morally flawless. Actually, Taoism is really not very interested in moral flawlessness or moral perfection, or in that case, even I might say, much in moral discrimination. As a matter of fact, the Genren are usually those who empty themselves of the distinctions that we make cognitively and the discriminations we make in terms of valuations of various sort, whether those be aesthetic, moral, or social. The distinctions between success, failure, beauty, ugly, even good, evil, I think are distinctions that genre normally are portrayed as emptying themselves of these kinds of concepts. So, what is it that the term is pointing to? I think it's pointing to or denoting a person who inhabits the world in a very certain kind of way, very alternate way, a way in which would be regarded rather as strange, different, not at all conforming to the normal patterns and socialization and acculturation that human beings typically value as construction. And this, of course, is one of the demarcations between Confucianism and Taoism, as I'm sure all of you know quite well without me elaborating on it at all. But a point I want to make this evening, and I'm not going to try to prove this point to you. I think maybe proof is something that we can't attain on this particular topic, but I I will give a swing at trying to convince you that my reading is makes sense of the text at least. But what I'd like to do is suggest to you that the alternative consciousness of the Genren is not the result of some sort of acquisition of knowledge, knowledge of the truth, or mystical vision of the truth, or beatific vision of the good. These kind of constructions that we see that show up a lot in philosophy. I'm going to suggest to you don't really have much of a home or a welcome in the presentations of the architecture of the emergence of Genren, especially as it's set up in the Zhuangzi. So here are a few passages. I think actually, if you were to sit down in the Zhuangzi in any particular chapter, I think probably chapter six. Chapter six is filled with we know we know a lot now about the literary structure, the compositional structure of Zhuangzi, and how it is pieced together editorially with numerous kind of logion that are strung together a little bit like beads on a string. And there are a lot of beads about Genren on the string that is chapter six. So I think chapter six is a good resource for us. The one I'm choosing here is not from that chapter, but it I think provides a very quick overview of the way in which Genren is often talked about in the Zhuangzi itself. These are people can walk through swamps that are ablaze and not get burned. They can cross frozen rivers and not be chilled. Now, of course, sometimes in the history of Taoism, these were taken literally, and hagiographies were created about persons associated with the ascription of Zhenren, or persons who were called immortals, Xian, transcendents of sorts. And these were taken literally, and hagiographies were created in an attempt to confirm these and transmit stories about various individuals. But I don't think that really Zhuangzi is intending these to be taken here literally, but taken instead in a way in which the Zhenren is pictured as being detached from the turbulence, various kind of forms of turbulence that can fill our lives and disrupt them, and instead practices a kind of innocence, quietude, stillness in his or her life. And these are often captured by metaphors such as to be a newborn infant. The Genren emerging from a change in consciousness is often described as or challenged with the question, can you become a or be in your life as a newborn infant? And of course, Zhuangzhou even entitles one of his chapters "Carefree Wandering" for as a way of capturing how it is Genren are in the world. This is just another example, and we could choose many of them from Zhuangzi. This one is, I think, maybe a little bit more familiar to us, and I think it illustrates very clearly how it is that Zhuangzi is trying to talk about the fact that Genren are in life, they are like still water. They do not, they are not shaken up by the turbulence of life, and they are able to detach themselves from that, just as we see that Bohun Wuren practices here as a teaching illustration to Liezi. We can talk about any of that you would like, or if you find this of interest. So this emergence of an alternative consciousness that I'm trying to described to you this evening as characteristic of the Zhenren is set forward in my view, in my reading. It is set forward as the Taoist answer to what we might call the human problem. We might take philosophical or certainly religious traditions as attempts to provide an answer, a solution, a way of coping with what it is that tradition conceives of as the human problem. If we think of the Abrahamic traditions in the West, by that I mean the Hebraic, Jewish tradition, the Christian, and the Islamic traditions, they all sort of have in common that they problematize the human dilemma as a matter of sinfulness or moral failing, particularly as this might relate to a supreme being that is a creator, a God, who has in mind a certain purpose and moral structure for humans that humans do not measure up to, that they fail, that they are flawed, that they're even willfully sinful. And so the philosophical system or the religious system is set up to provide a solution to this in the same way that the Greeks regard the human problem or regarded the human problem as a lack of wisdom, or the Buddhist, as the Buddhists consider the human problem. If you take just the basic Four Noble Truths of Buddhism, it's clear that the human problem is the problem of dukkha or suffering, and it's caused by desire. And in this sense, it's not always a desire for evil or moral failing. Desire as desire can be a place of the genesis of suffering. Even the desire for good can still nonetheless cause us to suffer. So this is why in the Four Noble Truths, the practice of nirvana, the practice of blowing out desire, is offered then as the solution to the human problem of suffering. What I want to suggest to you is that the way the Taoists conceive the problem of humanity is as the problem of will or volition. So in this sense, this problem is not solvable by knowledge or reason, not even by some high form of knowledge like mystical knowledge or the grasp of some mystical truth, because one can have all this truth, one can have knowledge, but not be able to will to follow the truth or follow the way. In the same way, this sentiment or feeling, even that sentiment toward the good, it could be quite pure, but being able to will the good and knowing what is the good, these are two different things. So I want to suggest to you that what Taoism is about is trying to solve this problem of will. And of course, I'm sure probably expect that I'm going to suggest that the Taoist answer to that is Wu Wei, which is the movement, the action of Zhenren and their altered consciousness. There's a way in which Zhenren is not an achievement, certainly not an achievement in a way that becoming a junzi or a sage, a shengwan, would be, as in Confucianism. And this, I think, is partly the truth of the sort of Confucian adage that Confucianism is yang and Taoism is yin. You know, we hear that a lot, even today in contemporary China. I still hear this. I hear it from my Taoist teachers and my Confucian teachers that they still sort of characterize things in this way. But in, and I think there's a certain truth to it. Uh, the change of consciousness that occurs in a genren is something that happens to that person, something that's received, um, and rather than something that's won, let's say, by effort. Um, and so, in this sense, then the genren um, is transformed in his or her very being, not just not one's knowledge or one's sentiment. Um, and there's a lot of wrestling with this throughout Taoist history. This kind of tripartite reason, sentiment, and will is wrestled with a lot throughout Taoist history. This is just from a passage from the Lao Tzu from Littlejohn, but uh, you can see that it's definitely playing with the themes of yin. And here we can see these kind of primal sort of metaphors for becoming Genren, being like a newborn infant, being like uncarved wood, very familiar concepts to us in Taoism. As is here the case of the introduction of the concept of Wu Wei, the perfected person, the Genren moves in Wu Wei, which I just translate here using Edward Slingerland's translation of Wu Wei, which I think is quite good actually. So now we may want to ask the question of, well, how is it that if Taoism developed some sort of set of practices that would usher in a change in consciousness, an actual change in the person, the being of the practitioner, making them, let's say, Genren and such. How is this done? And I think one of the persons who's worked, at least in the West, most diligently on this project is Harold Roth. And he's translated the Nei, which is the text out of the Guanzi. It's called the Inner Training. He's written a great deal about the emergence of practices that lead to a contemplative life and a contemplative practice. He notices that there's a certain grammar, a certain kind of linguistic family of concepts that accompany these practices. Formlessness, silence, stillness, calmness, emptiness. And so he's done a great amount of work for us in pointing to this. What I want to do is I want to take just a minute to point to something that shows up many times in the Zhuangzi as a kind of formula, either to describe a genren or to raise a question about someone who is exhibiting this stage of altered consciousness. And it's a recurring formula or phrase, sometimes put in a interrogative form, but it's here expressed: are you able to make your body appear as a withered tree? and your mind as dead ashes. Actually, when I mention this to my students, they don't find it very interesting or very attractive. It's not something that appeals to them as some kind of state of being or state of consciousness that they wish to achieve. Before we look very quickly at some of these examples, I want to make one comparative comment. What's being described here, I think, has a very strong connection to pre-Socratic Greek philosophy. I'm not talking about Socrates, Plato, Aristotle, but pre-Socratics like Parmenides, Pythagoras, Epiphanes, and Empedocles, the people who go back to the 5th century, the mid 400s BCE, and this sort of thing. These people were practitioners of a certain kind of contemplative life that in Greek is can be translated as incubation into English. So incubation is a form of stillness and quietude that typically was observed by the pre-Socratics in caves. And this was possible because not only did one make himself or herself very still and quiet, but also in the recesses of a cave, as I think probably you know, if you've ever been in a cave and had somebody turn out the lights, that your sensory deprivation can occur very quickly. And when it does, you do focus dramatically on your mind, on your mental contents, and these kinds of contents can really be one can really empty himself or herself of them. But I first came across this in reading the work of a person I want to recommend to you. His name is Peter Kingsley, and the book that I would suggest, if you're interested at all in this comparative project, the book I'd recommend is called The Dark Places of Wisdom. So anyway, I don't want to go further into that. I'm happy to talk about it if there's any interest in that. But if you have a look at that book, or you search it up on AI and get AI to give you back some of the key concepts and so forth, I think you'll find some intriguing things. But here, by now, I hope you've had a chance to look over this slide and you've seen what I pulled out is the five logion or narrative text of Zhuangzi that deal with this. And I'm now becoming very mindful of my time, so I'm going to speed up moving along because we have some wonderful commentators, and I know they'll have very intriguing questions and comments to make for us tonight, and will improve on my presentation greatly. Here, have a look at this. Maybe read this slide over quickly. But here you can see that as Yancheng Ziyou is approaching, he asked Ziqi, what's happening to you? Your body appears as a withered tree and your mind as dead ashes. And it seems you're not the same person. that was here before. And Zi responds, yes, I basically is responding, yes, I have heard the piping of heaven. If you're familiar with Zhuangzi, you know he really likes to play with the theme of the piping of earth and the piping of heaven. And with and it's not any happenstance that he makes an appeal to music, to the idea that um, there's a continuity between hearing what heaven might have to say, as it were, and um, hearing a musical composition that has no composer, or music that's playing um, that does not have an instrumentalist. Um, Take just a second to look at this, because I think it's quite interesting here that the tie that's made here, um, with the expression that we have is um, where Bai is paying a compliment to his disciple who has made his body like a withered tree and his mind like ashes, to say, yes, he walks through life now with the same kind of look of innocence of a newborn calf, and he's no longer trying to reason out why everything happens. Very famous passage here. Um, I'll let you just look at that quickly and then we'll go on. One of the famous passages from Zhuangzi where Kongzi, Confucius, is put in some sort of dialogue with Lao Dan or Lao Tzu. Um, and in this case, it's Kongzi who says to Lao Tzu, um, you've made your body so still, it's just like a withered tree. And your mind looks as if it's left the society of men. So when Roth is talking about these, Roth is talking about a profound mystical experience, some knowledge that is given, and some kind of oneness that attaches one to a mystical power, a kind of mystical force. And it's just this understanding that I'm trying to suggest we need to be cautious about, because this understanding always puts something in between the person and the experience. Some sort of mystical knowledge or new point of view or some sort of being or force that's called Tao, some sort of object, albeit a spiritual object or something. But it's this something in between that I think doesn't enable us to solve the problem of the will. Instead, I'm going to suggest that the experience itself is the experience of the change of a person, so that it's not granting some sort of knowledge or aligning with some sort of object or being, but instead it's undergoing the practitioner herself or himself changing. This is why the image of being a newborn is so prominent and occurs so often in connection with this experience. So, I suggest to you that in this case, we have to be very careful understanding um, what is meant when the text is talking to us about becoming one with Tao. I think becoming one with Tao means basically entering into this kind of altered state of life, and the altered state itself is Wu Wei, and the practitioner lives in this way, not because he believes in Tao or she has a relationship with Tao, or because they're empowered in some way by Tao mystically. So that's about what I want to say, and I don't think most of these comments just simply reinforce those. So maybe I'll just say thank you for being so patient and bearing with me as we've gone through and talked. You've been a really great audience, and thank you for sharing these ideas with me.
So thank you very much, Professor Littlejohn, for that extremely inspiring and stimulating presentation. And we will now move to the commentary session. Our first commentator is Mr. Henry Allen. Henry is a PhD candidate in Chinese philosophy at East China Normal University in Shanghai. His research focuses on moral exemplars in early and medieval Chinese thought, with a particular emphasis on the Taoist thinker and poet Ranji. And Henry, we will now appreciate your thoughts, please.
Hi. Yeah, Professor Littlejohn, thank you so much for that presentation. I really enjoyed it. So I have one very small comment, then a bigger comment, and then a few questions. So my small comment was just about the motivation for including the Tao Te Ching in this kind of analysis of the Zhenren, because it seems most of the focus is on the Zhenren and the Zhuangzi, and the Tao Te Ching seems more about the Shengren rather than the Zhenren. But since it was originally for a TV program, it makes a lot more sense to me why you would want to include the Tao Te Ching. But now my bigger comment was I really like the distinction you draw between your reading of the text and that of Harold Roth, because I think that reading is not just limited to Roth, but is a common way of reading the text. How when you become this Zhuangzian practice leads to insight, which then is the key to becoming a perfected person. That seems a pretty common understanding. And then you're saying that we shouldn't put this kind of knowledge or insight, if I understood you correctly, we shouldn't put this knowledge or insight between the practice and the practitioner, but rather the practice kind of directly changes the practitioner. One thing that this made me think of kind of in a comparative philosophical sense, I know you mentioned the pre-Socratics, going to the Greek side is the notion of spirituality, which Michel Foucault talks about in some of his lectures on ancient philosophy. And Foucault says that in much ancient Greek and Roman thinking, with some exceptions, the main question of philosophy is how to access the truth. And then access to the truth is said to depend on practices of self-cultivation that result in the transformation of one's being. And so one needs to transform one's being to be able to access the truth. And these processes of transformation are spiritual practices. So yeah, you cultivate yourself to access the truth. And then once you access the truth, it kind of rebounds on you and further changes you. So that's kind of Foucault's notion of spirituality. And here it seems like Roth's reading of the Zhuangzi kind of applies this framework to understanding the Zhuangzi, where you undergo this cultivation to be able to access insight, which is your goal and also kind of the final step in making you a perfected person. But it makes a lot of sense to me that Roth's reading here would be incorrect, and rather, like you say, practice leads directly to transformation of the person's being without kind of an insight or knowledge or the truth being the goal or some intermediary step. But that then leads to my first question, which is, what is the motivation for becoming a Zhenren? And I know you talk about the main human problem in Taoism of being the problem of the will and the Zhenren of solving the problem, but I don't see exactly what you mean by that. So, more specifically, to try to summarize what you said a bit, you say that in other traditions, the central human problem is, for example, suffering in Buddhism, or sinfulness or moral failing in the Abrahamic traditions, or in the Greek tradition, maybe lack of wisdom, which kind of points to this kind of movement towards the truth as being the goal there. But Taoism, you said, is rather concerned with the problem of the will, of how to kind of follow the way. Um, and so you being a Zhenren does not get you knowledge, it doesn't get you the truth, it doesn't get you moral goodness, it doesn't get you freedom from suffering, but it solves the problem of the will. But my question is how? How does it solve the problem of the will? So I wonder if you could expand on that a bit. And then a second question, if knowledge is not kind of a goal or outcome here, does it play any role? It seems like there would be kind of some kind of knowledge of the way the world works, maybe. But yeah, I'm just curious about if there is a role for knowledge still. And then my third question is about how I think this, I don't know if this was in your presentation, it might have been in a slide you didn't get to, but you talked in one of the slides about how Confucianism kind of covers over and intellectualizes what happens in Taoism, so makes it less about it's more about insight maybe, and less about the kind of the practice that gets you to change yourself, right? But Confucianism is also very practice oriented, right? And cultivation oriented, just in a different way. So I wonder if you had any thoughts on that, if Confucianism is also concerned with this problem of the will and just gets there in a different way, or if it has different goals. So those are my questions. Again, thank you so much for the presentation. Yeah.
Thank you, Henry, for those perceptive comments and insightful questions. So, Professor Littlejohn, we now welcome your response.
Well, my response is those are excellent. Oh my gosh, thank you so much, Henry, for those questions. And yeah, I think you really understood what I was trying to claim. And sometimes when you're trying to move one reading over in a different direction, you do sort of exaggerate the move and such. I'd like to, maybe, if it's okay with you, pick up with this question first of all about if knowledge isn't the goal, what is its role? I think if we look at the Zhenren through history, like a lot of those people I detailed in the beginning, who are ascribed to be Zhenren and such, they definitely think they know something. That the way in which they've been changed and the way they live, they think they know something that they can teach. That's why, they produce texts, start lineages, and so forth. And, we often think of Wu Wei as applying only to actions, but I think Wu Wei sometimes applies to thought as well. And there's a way in which there's a kind of carefree wandering that occurs in thought, where it's being offered as a kind of knowledge and such. So I agree with you totally. As a Genren begins to live, they definitely start talking about knowledge. They don't just use their life as a model. Someone who came to my mind while you were talking would be Wang Yangming. So Wang Yangming, in the 16th century, he's wrestling with this very problem as a Confucian/Taoist himself. And he comes up with this kind of notion of what he calls the Liangzhi, which is a meshing of Wu Wei and knowledge. So I think you're inspiring me to go back and study a little bit more about that. And Zheng, do I have time to comment on one of Henry's other questions or not?
Thank you. Deeply and thoughtful reply. So I would now like to introduce our second commentator, Dr. Shi Wei. Shi is a postdoctoral research fellow at the Tsinghua Academy of Chinese Learning. She holds a PhD from the Tsinghua University. Her research spans Chinese philosophy and intellectual history, with the current focuses on contemporary Confucian revival in China, particularly in the philosophical significance and theoretical contributions of Zheng New Confucian thought in contemporary contexts. She had published a monograph titled Universal and Particular Ideological Developments in the Contemporary Chinese Confucian Revival Movement from 2000 to 2020. So Dr. Shi, we look forward to your comments.
Thank you, Zheng. Thank you, Professor Littlejohn, very much for your rich and thought-provoking lecture. And it is my pleasure to serve as the commentator today. As I understand it, you offer a highly coherent account of Zheng by referring to a number of Taoist texts and showing that essence of Zheng lies not in moral perfection or special mystical knowledge, but in an alternation or transformation of consciousness. So in this sense, Zheng is understood not as a moral ideal or epistemic result, but a transformation of one's mode of being, the consciousness. And I found this point especially valuable because, understanding Zheng as a change in how one exists rather than a higher moral ideal shifts our focus from being a better person morally to learning how to live with more ease, with more openness and awareness. And seeing this way, Zheng is not something that unreachable ideal, but it is something that we can actually experience and practice in our daily life. And I think this would be very valuable. And I would also raise some questions for the discussion. First question is about the infant and Zheng. So there are so many Taoist texts that mention infants. And as we know, if the infant embodies an unformed or precognitive naturalness, while the Zheng embodies a consciously realized naturalness achieved through inner cultivation, through Neixiu. And how should we conceptualize the trajectory from the former to the latter? So is there any difference between the two? Is there anything that is actually added or removed in this transformation? And this is the first question. And second is about the role of Wu Wei in modern society. So how should we understand Wu Wei in concrete social roles or modern life? If the Zheng does not withdraw from the world, what does acting without forced intention look like for someone with responsibilities and obligations? And this is the second question. And the third would be from the perspective of female. So I'm wondering, so the role and image of women in the Taoist tradition of Zheng or in the tradition of perfected persons. So as you mentioned in the lecture, the examples of Zheng, so you mentioned Nanguo Ziqi and Bohun Wuren are all male figures, leaving unaddressed the question of whether there are female perfected persons in the Taoist tradition. In fact, we know that unlike Wei Furen, so there are many perfected persons or Zheng model in Taoist tradition. I think bringing this gender dimension into discussion would enrich the original topic because it highlights the potential aspect of Taoist thought often overlooked, Confucian thought overlooked. So Taoist implicit vision of gender equality. Since the Tao is realized through the unity of yin and yang, so male and female are usually, united. So I think this would be very interesting if you add this female perspective. So these are three questions that I would like you to elaborate more on. And also, by the way, I'm also very interested in your 10-episode series, and we look forward to watching it online when it is available. And thank you again for your inspiring lecture. Thank you.
Your valuable perspective and very interesting questions. So now we would appreciate your, so Professor Littlejohn will now appreciate your response to Dr. Shi's comments.
Thank you so much, Wei, for those fascinating points and comments. You and Henry both have brought forth so many interesting ideas. I will say one thing quickly about the role of Wu Wei in concrete life. I have to admit, the only answer I get from my Taoist teachers about that is you have to practice. If you practice the life, the contemplative life, the stillness, and then at least they always tell me, then you will understand how this works. Now, my students are never happy with this kind of response, and I think they all feel very, very much lost about how they could be a student at an American university and Wu Wei at all. And I don't know if you feel the same, Dr. Shi, as I about this, but I also feel the same dislocation a bit with that. So, but the answer I get from the Taoists who teach me in China is usually I know a lot about Taoism, American studying Taoism, but I don't practice. And if I practiced, this would not be a question. I don't know if you find that satisfactory or not, and I totally agree with you about the female. I think the female plays such an important and strategic role in Taoism and is in many ways related to your question about infant. But you know, I wish there were more text and more information about the practice of the female in Taoism. So there's there's an open area of study for someone as qualified and knowledgeable as you are, Dr. Shi. Go get it. I used to have this same conversation with Robin Wang about Confucianism and such. And now I'll have this conversation with you, I think, about Taoism and encourage you, I hope, to pursue that. And so I don't, maybe, I know that's not very satisfactory, but thank you so much for your questions.
Thank you, Professor, for your response. For our final commentary, we turn to Dr. Sharon Small, a researcher at Tel Aviv University. Dr. Small received her PhD from Peking University, and her work deeply explores Taoist thought and its relevance to modern ethical and universal values. Recently, she published an article titled "The Feminine Force in Early Taoist Thought." So, Sharon, we welcome your perspective.
First of all, thank you for your introduction, but I have a few remarks. I'm not from Tel Aviv University, and I'm now in Beijing Normal University, and my research on the article on the feminine force was kind of in the past. But thank you very much, and thank you, Professor Littlejohn, for your fascinating talk that really tied some things together for me, from early texts in Taoism to later developments. And also one interesting connection that it made for me was between De and Zheng. So, well, I know more of like maybe the Laozi than the other texts, but one of the important things in De, in a passage that appears with De, one of the, at least in the Guodian Laozi, there's not a lot of De that appears, but one of the central ones is with the newborn baby. I can't hear. So with the newborn baby, which is here connected to the Zheng, and maybe the lack of will, which, thank you, it helps me very much in my future research. So I was wondering if here, there is some connection between the Zheng and a kind of De. And also there's if you look at the Lunheng a little, which is later, maybe Han Dynasty, and there's a lot of description of the Zheng as something that could be cooked without dying, and maybe because that's metal and stone, but then there's the metaphor of water as a supple baby. So yeah, I guess that's my only question between those two. Thank you.
Thank you, Sharon, for your valuable perspective. And Professor Littlejohn, we invite you your final response to Dr. Sharon's comments.
Well, I just say I'm astounded how each of the three commentators came up with such interesting points. And Dr. Small, I think the connection between De and Zhenren, this is really intriguing to me. I have to admit, I haven't thought that much about it. And so I really look forward to your work in that area, because especially since you've been working on De. And what would you think about also connecting Wei into this kind of orbit that if we're talking about Genren undergoing some kind of alternate consciousness, Wu Weiing, here I use Wu Wei as a verb, Wu Weiing, and what do they exhibit? They exhibit De. And I don't know, I'm just playing with these ideas because it's so suggestive. Your point is so suggestive, and also I noticed that you brought up, as did both Dr. Schur and also Henry, the idea of the infant, and I think that this idea of the infant is crucial. There's a sort, and I didn't really talk that much about it, I suppose, and I need to think more about it, and would appreciate suggestions that you all have. But the idea of the new birth, the and you're born so that you move with spontaneity, with carefreeness, with effortlessness. This, I think, all these are characteristics of the Genren. And so, anyway, again, I haven't done justice to the quality of the commentators, Zheng, but thank you so much, Dr. Small, for those suggestions. Please continue your publishing in the area of De. I'm excited about that.
Okay, so thank you once again to Professor Littlejohn and to our three commentators for that engaging exchanges and profound discussions. So now we will open the floor for questions from an online audience. So to ask a question, please use the raise hand function in the platform and unmute your microphone directly. And alternatively, you can also type your question in the chat box. So let me see. The first question maybe from Angela Shin. You can unmute your microphone. Thank you.
Thanks, Professor Littlejohn, and thanks all the commentators. Here I have two questions. The first one is that Taoist defines Zhenren as someone who continually empties oneself. Then how it is possible to maintain personal identity and still regard oneself as the same person? Because, if I regard myself as myself all the time, I usually need to have some constant properties, maybe some biological properties, maybe a piece of memory. So in this case, I can know that I am myself. As for Zhenren, I guess they always want to empty themselves, and other properties they have, they are contingent. So how they always definite themselves as themselves. And another related question is that we've mentioned the male and female Zhenren. So it seems that some unchangeable properties will not influence Zhenren to be Zhenren. They don't need to change these stable properties on purpose. So these are my two questions. Thank you.
So thank you, Angela, for those precise and constructive comments and questions. So please, Professor Littlejohn, to this question.
I may have gone over it too quickly in the slides, Angela, but there is one of those 5 passages where the formula you made your body as a withered tree and your mind is ashes. There's one of those passages that's concerning Zhi, and where Zhi says, "I have lost myself." And this is a little bit troubling to me because I really wonder if one's own identity, and maybe this is also what's bothering you, if one's identity is lost, how do you emerge as a Junrun? How do you come out of this consciousness, or how do you go forward? Are you still recognizable? Do you need a new name? How do you re-engage back with those you love, those you care about? You're as you go back into the world, and this was a part of Dr. Scher's concern too about going back into into the common world and such. So I think identity is preserved, but I'm not really sure that that I can put my finger on a text where this question is addressed. Again, here's another example where a questioner or a commentator has come up with such a good question that I want to encourage her to please go and look into this issue some more. The continuation of identity. I think certainly if you look at the Chuanjian materials, the stories about the 7 perfected persons, their identity does continue, to be sure. So there is identity in change in the Zhenran. But I wish I could say something more intelligent, Angela, about that. I really do. I wonder if you want to respond to that or share your own idea, because I would be anxious to hear it.
Yeah, I just have a quick response. I guess maybe it is related to the problem of view. Even though they don't have some account of their view, they know that this view is like an empty bag or so, and this is what they can identify themselves as themselves. But as time passes, they can fill in with different properties, different content. Yeah, and they just want us not to stick to some properties. So that's what is called empty oneself.
Thank you. Thank you for both Professor Littlejohn and for the question from Angela. And then we move to our second question from David Andrea. You can unmute your microphone now, please.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah, very clear.
Thank you, Professor Littlejohn, for the presentation. I think my question is basically a follow-up on what Henry was asking at the beginning, like about knowledge. And like I'm trying to figure out like your view when you claim that like attaining some kind of knowledge is not the goal of the kind of spiritual path that you find advocated or presented in the Zhuangzi. And so I think that I mean, if that's what you mean, like if what you mean by attaining knowledge is not the goal, is that, you know, we don't attain that ideal by saying studying some theory and figuring out what's the right theory about, say, the nature of the world or something like that, then I would definitely agree, right? But at the same time, like I find many examples of like ideal person in the Zhuangzi, say Butcher Ding, right? And Butcher Ding, it says, well, when I cut up oxen, I follow the heavenly patterns, right? The Tianli. And in the story of woodcarver Qing, he says, well, I go into the forest and I see the heavenly nature, Tianqing, of the tree, right? And so, like, it seems to, like, my reading of these passages is that, like, the person who has attained that goal, they are attaining this kind of new, deeper, more insightful vision of reality, right? They're able to see reality maybe some kind of conceptually unmediated way, like a way that is not shu and fei, but is kind of deeper than that. And that is, I would articulate as attaining a kind of greater knowledge, right? So I wonder what you think about that. Is it like, would you deny that that's knowledge, or you think it's part of the picture but it's not central, or I don't know, something else? Yeah.
Okay, thank you, David, for your question. And now we invite Dr. Professor Littlejohn to reply. Mm-hmm.
Outstanding question, David. I think once one undergoes a kind of transformation or change as a Zhenren, they definitely then, you're exactly right. They definitely then talk about knowledge. You and Henry are right. So in this case, the things they know, things they understand. And I think that's a progressive evolution as they continue to live, as they continue to move in Wu Wei. They continue to talk about things that they know. They pass along teachings, information, this sort of thing. I guess what I'm getting at is that I don't know if in the experience itself of the change of consciousness, whether in that experience in itself there is, how shall I say, content. You know,
Like content in
or
the sense of attaining some kind of
yeah,
vision of phenomena, something like that. Is that the idea?
yeah,
You denying?
yeah,
Yeah.
A way or a sense of how to move, how to go forward. But then as they do that, I think then yes, they definitely start talking about things they know or teachings they want to pass along or can pass along. And I could be wrong about this, David. You
No,
know,
thank you. Yeah, right. It makes sense to me. Yeah. I mean, I guess there is a distinction between like what you get at the end and what is needed in the process to get to that point, right? So
yeah,
maybe
that's a good distinction. Yeah,
like,
that's very
like you
good.
get some kind of knowledge at the
That's very
end, but
good.
achieving knowledge is not part of the process, I suppose. That's,
Yeah,
yeah, makes sense.
yeah,
Thank you.
that's very good. It's very good.
Okay, so thank once again for the valuable perspective from David and also for the illuminating reply from Professor Littlejohn. So this has been an incredibly rich discussion. And so I'm also afraid and we have reached the end of our time. And on behalf of all of us, I would like to extend our deepest gratitude to brilliant lecturer Professor Ronnie Littlejohn for his masterful lecture and gracious engagement. And my thanks also to our three commentators, Henry Allen, Dr. Shi Wei, and Shi Wei for the sharp and constructive contributions, and more importantly, to our engaged online participants. So the pursuit of understanding the perfect person is a long and rewarding journey. And today's conversation has provided us with many valuable thoughts. And we hope you will join us for future dialogues. And Paul, do you have more to say, or I just say the closing remarks?
Yeah, no, that's great, Zheng. And yeah, thank you so much, everyone. Thank you, especially Professor Ronnie Littlejohn. That was a wonderful talk, and I think the engagement that we had with our commentators and the audience was really exactly what we're looking to encourage, the type of discussion we're trying to encourage. So wait, I'm gonna